Hi, Tim Hughes here, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me, as always, this is our special artificial intelligence session. I've got Ed Fowler.
Hey there, folks.
And we've got a couple of things that we're going to talk about in terms of AI developments over the last 2 weeks. And if there's any questions that you have, anything you don't understand, any articles that you've seen that you particularly want us to talk about, then please put them in the chat and we're more than happy to do that.
Awesome.
I did see something this week which said that Grandview Research said the global AI market would be worth 390.9 billion and will grow by 46.2% by 2025. I think you could put any finger in the air.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen stuff from McKinsey's that was suggesting $1 trillion.
I reckon let's round it up to a
round it up, nearest trillion. I mean,
yeah.
$1 trillion here, $1 trillion there. Soon you're talking serious money.
And serious vested interest. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, because it's been everywhere, is that Geoffrey Hinton, or is it Hinton? Basically, Dr. Hinton has left Google.
Yeah,
he was their head of AI, and he's basically said that it's all got out of hand.
So,
what do you think, Ed?
Hinton deserves a lot of credibility. Hinton is responsible for some of the original thinking of theory of mind that we've translated into AI. His original work on advanced neural networks, which combined software engineering techniques, analytics of data, and some pretty profound mathematical insights, is a foundational there. And he's very well respected and known in academia, started up a bunch of companies, and his company was acquired by Google, which is why he works for them. And he was responsible for Google's transformation into an AI company, which Google should be, on paper, ideally placed for. They have everybody's data. They've got this culture of rapid experimentation. They've got some really smart engineers, mathematicians, and even philosophers working for them. Yet they don't seem to have done anything with this. And there's kind of two faults for this. One, there's a commercial reality that Google's primary revenue stream is search. And search is dominated by basically paid search, rung up a ramped in. I slap some words in. Google basically serves the nearest advert to the top of it. Now, generative AI applied to search destroys that business model because you can now have a much richer interrogation with it, and putting sort of paid adverts in there is much harder. Secondly, Google hasn't done anything with AI. They have played a lot with it, and nothing has become real. They've paid a lot of money for an awful lot of AI startups, but their shareholder return on value is pretty limited. So my take on this is slightly more cynical. I'm usually very optimistic about most things. I'm very optimistic about technology, but I'm very cynical when it comes to human interaction. Geoff Hinton hasn't been a successful head of AI for Google. And the research that Google have sponsored hasn't gone anywhere. Their current versions of stuff doesn't work particularly well. Now, I get that somebody who's looking back on a life's work may be quoted as saying he regrets it all. But his then statements to say that this is a threat will become more intelligent than humanity needs to be unpicked a bit. On one level, yeah, we will generate something that's more intelligent than the average human being probably within the next 50 years. It's not a straight line easy. Every time we look at human intelligence, it becomes more challenging to unpick. There becomes more capability. We've been saying that human intelligence can be matched by $1,000 machine probably once a year or so for the last 35 years, certainly to my knowledge. And it's not there, because every time you look at the sort of lump of goo between our ears, the complexity just goes up. And we're now talking not even connections between neurons, but quantum interactions between standing columns of water molecules, which puts your complexity order 6 orders of magnitude up. There is also a gap in how you look at consciousness and AI, and it's a fundamental gap that we don't really understand what consciousness is. We don't understand self-awareness, and it's defined as a hard problem in philosophy. There's no easy bridge. So for us to say that something is more intelligent has to be unpicked. Could it answer a question probably as well as a human being? Yeah, I think we can probably see that now. Will it actually have purpose to create, persevere, and change reality to fit its purpose, which is what sort of humanity does? No, much harder to do. So Hinton's words come across as a little bit like Oppenheimer. I have become death, destroyer of worlds. Let me look back on my life's work with grave import. And that's self-aggrandizing. It was self-aggrandizing for Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was wrong. A, we didn't destroy ourselves. And B, the atomic bomb wasn't the thing we'd have done it with anyway. He was slightly sad because he didn't get to develop the thermonuclear device, which was the follow-on that was given to Teller. Now, for posterity, everybody thinks Oppenheimer, father of the bomb, father of the Cold War. Not true. To a degree, self-immolation would have come from Teller's super or thermonuclear device. So Oppenheimer was removed. He makes these big potential statements, and everybody grants it. Hitler is trying to do the same thing, in my view. Now, it's opinion. I've got no knowledge of this man in person. I've never met him, but his words don't come across well. And certainly, the marketing push has been generated by some pretty powerful vested interests.
He's yeah. I mean, if you look at, he's had an awful lot of press.
Yeah.
So he's obviously got a lot of connections, and people have to recognize that actually, when the Guardian comes out with the Guardian newspaper comes out with an article, you got to remember that what the Guardian wants is to go back to an age when we all read newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's strange because if today Shell came out with their results,
Yep.
Shell, the oil company. Now, they never went to BP and said, "What do you think?" Because you wouldn't, because they're a competitor. How stupid would you do that? Except the BBC are allowed to talk about their competitors and talk them down, because they talk about social media and they talk that down. So they're allowed to do that. It's a strange thing, and I think that there's been a certain amount of there's a recognition from an editorial perspective that these things are a threat. Therefore, we're going to talk them down.
And that's very actually. If you kind of think about it, journalism's kind of been devalued in this country for a long time anyway. The moment that sort of local media was kind of almost wiped out by BBC and Facebook, then the art of learning how to sift drivel into something of interest, which you gain by sitting in magistrates' courts, listening to the court cases going past, or looking at interesting stuff as they fly by you, that's kind of been devalued anyway. And now to the point you have ChatGPT and other generative AIs coming up. And do you know what? With a bit of tinkering, you could get them to just sit across the Reuters newsfeed and generate as much editorial as you wanted, particularly in text form. I mean, that's now quite like
well, BuzzFeed have closed, haven't they? I mean, BuzzFeed used to be they were the big, sexy internet editorial thing.
They were the good bit as well. I mean, the bit that they closed was BuzzFeed's investigations, which actually wasn't decent. BuzzFeed itself is whatever. But BuzzFeed Investigations was high quality, important, balanced, to a degree, investigative journalism. And they've shut that because nobody cared. Now you're going to get ChatGPT filters, or I should say generative AI filters, that will just create my own personal newsfeed. And that'll end up in a telephone. So if you were the Guardian or the BBC or something like that, this is a pretty existential threat if you are essentially a print or text journalist. Now, if you're a video journalist or something like that, maybe there's less threat, but it's not long behind it. And it's going to be interesting to see that certainly associated trades, for example, the Screenwriters Guild in America has gone on strike, which one of the things they're complaining about is that studios don't use AI to write scripts. And I think part of that is unrealistic because AI can't challenge yet a good script. It's still quite middle of the road writing. However, if what you're pumping out week after week is soap or heavy procedural stuff, which is all the same, either being a detective or a surgeon or whatever, then yeah, AI scripts could hammer those out pretty nicely right now and probably write more balanced, more interesting plotlines. But the truly innovative stuff it can't do. So unless those screenwriters are pushing for truly innovative concepts, or rather customer expectations are more towards those, then AI is a really pretty existential threat, and that strike could have a very strong place. I mean, I'm all in favor of certain forms of labor relations and stuff like that, but in some cases, industries turn over.
I think it is interesting that that we've had a strike so quick into the AI age, where people have actually if people have missed it, there's writers in Hollywood that are striking because of AI. Obviously, they want more money, but we all want more money. But they're actually striking because of AI and the fact that AI may take their jobs. And it's interesting that that's happened so quickly. We've also had a company called I'd not come across it, called Chegg,
Yeah.
who have actually announced to the stock market that they no longer have a business model.
Yes,
And for those that don't know, what Chegg do is, if you're a student, you go to them and you say, "I've got an essay to write, and I'll give you so much money." And what happens is that they have people in India and Ethiopia and stuff like basically who will write it for you. And they've just announced the stock market they no longer have a business model. So that we've got the first company that's gone bust because of it.
Yeah, and there's others coming. I see that there was announcements possibly from Duolingo and some of the translator ones as well.
Yeah, so there's been a number of posts on LinkedIn this week about there's a David Attenborough video that's been going around with him talking in lots of different languages.
Yeah, and it's just like, dude, this is pretty transformational. I mean, there is some diagnostics that you can spot in these industries that are ripe for change. Anything which is a gig economy, which doesn't necessarily involve you peddling your legs, is probably something the AI can do. Now, one of the things back to the sort of screenwriters ones is one of the things I was actually complaining of was about there was a sort of Uberization of screenwriters. Instead of you being a contracted screenwriter, you became a gig screenwriter. And the moment you can go gig, you're kind of going, this is highly replaceable. So the second area that's going to be possibly here is in those other entrenched interests are some of the professions. I don't know if you saw a statement this week from Khan, the guy who founded Khan Academy. Now, Khan Academy is one of the great free resources of the internet. It is basically how to learn maths. This guy could have monetized this into the tens of billions and gave it away for free. So Khan Academy is a huge, we're talking up there with Wikipedia levels of importance. It teaches you maths from a foundational level through to a degree. And it's really bloody good. I urge everybody to go look at it. He's basically said that AI offers kind of a flip side. The vastest opportunity in education he's ever seen, that everybody will have something which was previously the province of only the very rich, which was personalized high quality tuition throughout their life. So he's seeing this flip side of it. Now, if you ask most educators, they will go, "Oh my God, this is imperiling, this is terrifying, this is, people will cheat, they won't learn." And you see somebody from the other way around going, we can give so much more than the current model. So you could look at industries that are threatened, like journalism, like screenwriting, like some of the professions, and flip it around. What opportunities does an AI give you as a journalist? And the answer is they're vast. You can actually get to understand and analyze underlying motive, which they've never been able to do before, and be able to trace your evidence. I look at, shall we say, the Financial Times. The Financial Times prides itself on the quality of its analysis, but that's an expensive, difficult niche market. If you're a standard journalist, almost on a local newspaper, you could now use this to literally analyze to the same quality as the FT's business analytics desk and get really high quality results out of it. You're not using it to write just fill in column inches. You're getting it to the point of something really valuable. And that's an entirely different shift. And I think, again, sort of, I'm very optimistic about this, but those professions that are seeing this only as risk haven't fully thought through the benefits that they could get from it. That's kind of my view.
So, and in terms of, you also wanted to talk about gaming. Now, gaming is something I know nothing about.
So I possibly have, if you look at, shall we say, my Steam account, everybody has a sort of PC gaming Steam account. It indicates that I may have spent a few too many hours playing computer.
But you say that there's this new game out called Galactic Civilizations 4.
Yeah, and it's the first.
Now I learned something today, Ed, which is there's a 3-letter acronym called NPC, which is non-playing characters.
Non-player character.
So most people are talking about in gaming is for non-playing characters or NPCs. Now, there was actually a game out in 2014 called Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
That actually had AI, which basically tried to track you down and kill you.
It did. They had what you would call it had machine learning inside the.
It had a machine learning,
and they could predict your patterns. It was a pig.
It's amazing what you find on the internet.
So,
but Disney have actually backed a startup called InWorld for 50 million for Series A. 50 million for Series A is a lot of money.
There's kind of
what are you seeing in the gaming market?
There's two things. I've spent a lot of my life solving the alien isolation problem to make a smarter monster. Yeah, because games are more immersive, therefore more engaging if you do it. So I used to write computer games when I was a kid, and I used to write a degree of focusing on the minds of the monsters, the NPCs, to make the game richer, to make the monsters harder. And I came with some clever ways to do it. That's not quite what I'm focusing on. The obvious use case for AI is to make a better monster. So you take the existing game framework and you make a better monster. Great. And it really works, by the way. However, there are vastly simpler ways of doing it than rather than putting a full machine learning capability in there or a generative AI model inside of it. They're like using an atomic weapon to shoot down a fly. However, if you flip it around the other way, one of the things about games is the more successful the game is, it tends to have a richer narrative. Now, richer narratives can be driven in two ways. One, we slavishly spend ages writing a story, or we create narrative complexity using intelligence. Now, many of the games have either gone for better NPCs or they've gone for multiplayer. So the people I'm seeing in the game are another human being. So if you like that, you can get sworn up by trigger happy 13-year-olds.
So basically, you that's where you all get together and you spend the night shooting your mate.
Is you mate or some people you're just being matched
in the game, by the way.
Yeah,
sorry.
And that makes a very rich experience. Or you build these AIs up into it and it builds a rich experience too. But what you can use generative AI for, and this is what they're starting in this Galaxy Civilizations, is it makes a richer narrative. Now, an awful lot of the gaming industry at the moment relies on what's called DLC, downloadable content, which you typically charge extra for. And that's usually either some form of clever AR NPC or a narrative extension. And they are very profitable. You sell the initial game like a platform almost, and people buy chunks. What Galactic Civilizations 4 have done is there is a generative AI experience in your character creation and the other character creations. So you can type in there, as I did, I would like to play as a race of sentient chocolate pudding, whose style is reminiscent of Britain in the High Victorian Age. And it creates the whole thing. Images, iconography, ship design, your own capabilities, with inside a parameter, but improvises that. So that, basically the guys who wrote this, Stardog, have realized that they've cannibalized one of their revenue streams from previous games to make a richer game. But they're also saying that these are now going to trigger narrative events. So instead of you sketching out a narrative event, creating the artwork, creating the logical trees and the test conditions for victory, this is going to do it on the fly. And that has got some pretty profound effects inside gaming. If you can rock up in a scenario, which typically has been you and your mates shooting each other in a relatively well-known universe or setting, and suddenly that's brand new every time. And we're not talking sort of what's called procedural generation, which is I rock up and it creates something random within inside a box. This is cohesive narrative that is created in real time. And that's something quite different. So you can get environmental creation quite easily, but narrative has been difficult. And that's a huge flip. Now, gaming is worth in excess of $150 billion a year at the moment. It's predicted to hit by the end of the decade over $250 billion.
Because you said before we came on that gaming is worth more than
music,
and video, the cinema, and the theatre industry all added together.
Yeah, and music.
And music.
It's a vast industry. So the US market for gaming alone is 50 billion. The market in China is about 46 billion. The market in the UK, which I think is the fourth largest market after South Korea, is north of $9 billion a year just spent on gaming. And this idea of now being able to create my own stories inside games is going to change a lot of the stuff. It will alter the balance between me as the consumer and you, Mr. Game Publisher, as the creator. It will alter the balance between what they call AAA games, the big games. Like, for example, Microsoft and Activision were blocked this last week by the Competitions and Markets Authority in the UK. And they have some intellectual property, one of which is called Call of Duty, which is one of the big money spinners for everybody. Now, that's a AAA game. The initial game costs somewhere between $70 to $100. And then you buy extensions and content for that. And there's microtransactions in it. That is a big studio, lots of people working on it, lots of test cases. It's expensive and highly profitable. If you flip it around with now generative AI inside the story making piece and the art generation piece and the testing piece, maybe even in the engineering piece in due course, your big studio doesn't necessarily need to have like 1,500 people working for it or 500 or 100. You could be done by 2 or 3 people for the same quality and scale of game, which means there's a ton of stuff that's going to come out very rapidly about games that are not AAA suddenly being top of it. And there was one that was released very recently called Everspace 2. Quite a small studio produces that. One of the highest game scores everywhere. Currently got 400,000 people playing it concurrently at the moment. according to Steam figures, which is huge. That's
It's
a little tiny game.
but isn't that one of the things about AI, that we can actually be building companies
Oh,
that could be worth $1 billion, but we've only got 5 employees?
And that, yeah, there was a couple of articles I think we both saw this week that there's predictions that the next unicorn will be being made now, which is somewhere between 3 and 5 employees only, because AI is going to automate absolutely everything else. And to Rob, your point on LinkedIn, the question you put in there, amalgam of information, creativity becomes absolutely more valuable. If you are just pumping out repetitive stuff, AI is a threat. But if you are capable of doing what's called a flatland moment, the last truly innovative concept, certainly in science fiction from 1890s, then yes, your creativity is now amplified, your reach is better. And the ability for you to turn your creative idea into something, your ability to execute, hugely amplified as well. Again, back to a minimum of 1,000% productivity improvement.
So we're kind of at the 20 minutes, Ed. So thank you so much for coming on. And I think that sounds like a great place to kind of stop, because we kind of started with Geoffrey Hinton and the fact that it's all doom and gloom. And then we've kind of gone through this process and said, look, actually, there's a great opportunity here if we just got our heads around it.
Yeah, it's going to require some creative thinking, maybe some retrenchment for certain people, and some people are going to have to reconsider stuff. But the amount of stuff we can now do just with effectively stuff that's almost free is vast. And
I think you spoke about in the first episode about how back in 1985 we had what was a whole bunch of people. We had a job function called an administrator.
Yeah, and clerical.
A clerical person who did filing and did typing and stuff like that, because of the PC and the AMI Pro and AMI Word and Microsoft Word and all of those things, Harvard Graphics. By 1995, that job had gone. Now those people went and did something else.
Yeah, they became product managers,
and in fact, they probably are doing something better than what they were doing. And that's the opportunity, isn't it?
It is, and I think it also strengthens back to this idea of you left school and did one job for your whole career, with a relatively small change in that career, probably not even less realistic than it was then. What's going to happen now is going to be a focus on relearning. Your ability to train and educate yourself is going to become even more paramount than it was before. You can't sort of sit in your laurels, because you sitting about just expecting to do the same thing tomorrow you were doing today, probably less and less realistic. Anyway.
Ed, thank you so much for coming on. And Rob,
have a great afternoon, Tim.
Sorry?
Have a great afternoon, Tim.
Thank you. And Rob, thanks for chipping in as well. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for your contribution, Rob. Take care now.